Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill C-3 is once again before us. The Liberals have dismantled our immigration system and turned it into a circus. They threw open our borders, inviting in millions of people over the last decade without the necessary housing, health care, or jobs to support them. Let's look at the results, Madam Speaker. Housing prices have shot up to unattainable levels. We're already in a housing deficit before increasing our population. Adding millions of new people to a housing market that was already undersupplied created an environment that resulted in skyrocketing rents and out-of-reach home prices. Just last week in my riding, Madam Speaker, I had a mother tell me that their daughter wanted to start a family, but couldn't because they could not afford to buy a home. Another father told me his son, working full-time but cannot afford a place to rent, is stuck in the basement. Many of my colleagues on this side of the aisle, and I'm sure on that side of the aisle are hearing the same stories across our entire country. Madam Speaker, at Health Committee, witnesses noted that if immigration levels continue to be mismatched with provincial health care delivery, outcomes will suffer for all Canadians. Madam Speaker, let me tell you, Canadians are already suffering. Liberals, not considering healthcare capacity in their immigration policies, have meant longer wait times for both immigrants and Canadians. People are waiting upwards of 8 hours in hospital emergency rooms. And when they get a room, they're in the hallway for hours and hours, if not days. People are waiting months to see a specialist for basic diagnostic services. Longer wait times mean everyone's health suffers. Madam Speaker, right now, there's also a youth job crisis. Just in the Greater Toronto Area alone, youth unemployment is hovering dangerously close to the 20% mark. The importance of a first job in high school or coming out of higher education cannot be understated for our youth wanting to start their life, their adult life. A first job for our youth builds critical skills and kickstarts a career. Without the ability to get a job, especially a first job coming out of higher education, long-term earnings are impacted, careers stall, and a sense of hopelessness kicks in. That's the situation our youth find themselves in after 10 years of disastrous Liberal immigration policies, where a mind-boggling amount of temporary foreign workers and international students were let in the country. When the Prime Minister says we need to make sacrifices, what he really means, Madam Speaker, is both new immigrants and Canadians must suffer for 10 years of Liberal failed policies. So, Madam Speaker, with all that in mind, forgive me if I am a bit skeptical about the Liberal migration bill before us, as it promises to potentially add thousands of new Canadians into an already overburdened system that does nothing to address the challenges we are already seeing. As I have previously mentioned in speeches on this bill, Liberals will say that they have to pass the legislation because of a lower court ruling that said the first-generation limit of citizenship by descent could go on indefinitely. What they failed to mention is that not only did they not appeal the court ruling, but they have control over how it is implemented through the legislation that they put forward as a minority government. The legislation before us today does not include the common sense amendments passed at committee, as we've heard all morning. Those amendments would have turned a lousy Liberal bill into a slightly less lousy Liberal bill. Yesterday felt a bit like déjà vu, Madam Speaker. Liberals once again joined by their coalition partners, the NDP, to vote down our common sense amendments. Madam Speaker, I'm going to summarize for you what happened. The committee studied the bill. Conservatives worked together with our bloc colleagues to pass reasonable amendments, such as new Canadians being required to know one of the two of our official languages, having a criminal background check to protect the safety of Canadians, and a lot of other important points. Then Liberals came to the House and voted down all of the amendments. What are the amendments they voted against, Madam Speaker? Liberals voted against new Canadians having a criminal background check. Residents in my riding do not want people with criminal records immigrating to Canada and walking in our streets. Liberals voted against new Canadians knowing a little bit of either the English or French language. It is hard to integrate into a new country already knowing the language, let alone not knowing the language is setting up, certainly, immigrants to fail. Even the minister said that our official languages were part of Canadian values. If these are Canadian values, as the minister suggested, why did the Liberals vote against them putting them in the bill? Why didn't the minister, who believes that, not put him in the bill in the first place? Liberals also voted against harmonizing the residency requirements that someone requires to obtain citizenship through naturalization with citizenship by descent. Providing proof of 3 years residency over an entirety of someone's life will cause huge administrative problems. The amendment that was proposed changed this to 3 years within a 5-year period, consistent with how our immigration system works now. How is an immigration officer supposed to verify, Madam Speaker, 3 years of a physical presence over the course of someone's life, using records that are decades old and in many cases may not even exist? But, Madam Speaker, I have something to get off my chest. At Immigration Committee last week, the 7th Liberal immigration minister in the last 10 years was questioned on a different bill. When I started mentioning the potential improvements to her, she said, as I quote, "Suggestions and helpful comments are very much appreciated," and went to say that the committee is here to give recommendations. Madam Speaker, how the process on Bill C-3 has played out is emblematic of the last 10 years of this Liberal government. They do not care about recommendations. They don't care about what other parliamentarians have to say. They have no respect for amendments and recommendations coming out of the standing committees of Parliament. Our immigration system is an unmitigated disaster right now. Multiple parties took part in this legislative process, proposed amendments to make a lousy Liberal legislation better, and what do these Liberals do? They vote the amendments down. Not only on this bill, pretty much on every bill that comes into the House. I have news for members opposite, Madam Speaker. Canadians elected them just as much as they did us to come to Ottawa. In fact, there's 174 members of this 343-member House that are not Liberal. That might be a surprise to the members opposite, who are behaving as if they have a huge majority in this government. Do the members opposite realize them voting down these amendments tells me and all Canadians Liberals don't care if Canadians can speak English or French? It tells me and all Canadians that Liberals don't care if they can execute their immigration policies. And it tells me and all Canadians that Liberals don't care if new Canadians with criminal background records are being released into our communities. Madam Speaker, I'll end with this. I am not surprised this Liberal government is putting forward more legislation that will add to the chaos in our immigration system. We know the immigration system is a train wreck because each of our constituency offices are inundated with immigration files. Every office, of course, except the Prime Minister's. Madam Speaker, it's been half a year since this out-of-touch Prime Minister has been elected. He still doesn't have a constituency office to serve his riding. So he wouldn't know what we're dealing with every day in our constituency offices. If he can't figure out how to serve his own constituents, how can we expect him to serve the country? Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister's priorities are everywhere else but here. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Deputy House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I imagine that the member opposite was here at the last Parliament, and his party voted for this bill to pass. And this is part of this misinformation that they're just trying to fear-monger Canadians to think that we're doing something we're not doing. They voted against our tough on crime bill. They have no plans to support our budget that Canadians send us to this House to vote on. But when it comes to dividing Canadians, they rise up. Why did he vote for this bill in the last Parliament that passed? Why did they mislead Canadians to believe that they were going to do this? And now in this new Parliament, they want to shift it. They want to use it as a political score point so they can send budget fundraising emails to raise money. Why are they doing that to Canadians? Why are they misleading Canadians?
Honourable Member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Madam Speaker, I'll attempt to address that ridiculous question from the member opposite. That member opposite, along with members of the Liberal Party, have stood up on this bill and on other bills and have said to us before the amendments were presented in this House, have said, take it to committee and come back with recommendations and amendments. Of course we do that and we come back and they vote them down. Well, I have something to say to them. As hard as they try and as eloquent as they are in their speeches in this House, there's one thing they haven't mastered yet, Madam Speaker. They haven't mastered how to suck and blow at the same time.
Yes, the Honourable Member for Waterloo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Earlier there was a Conservative colleague who stood up, and I agreed with that point, and I think the member also agreed with that point. That is, even though not in the previous Parliament, an experienced member, and I think he should retract those comments and apologise.
The Honourable Member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill. Yes, that was not of place remark.
Madam Speaker, I take...
Point of order.
Can we let the Honourable Member answer first? Can he answer first, the Honourable Member?
Madam Speaker, I have a lot of respect for you and this House. You can't say one thing one day and say the same thing, say something different the next day. You can't inhale and exhale at the same time. If those words are more appropriate for you, okay? If those are more
Debate, but the way order. The reasoning for whatever we...
And he knows this.
Can the Honourable Member for Waterloo allow me to speak? What causes disruption is what actually always translates into not being parliamentary. So I offer to the Honourable Member that it did cause disruption, and I would accept that the Honourable Member substituted the words for inhale, exhale, and thank you for that. The Honourable Member. Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires, l'honorable député de Shefford.
The Honourable Member for Shefford. My colleague was talking about immigration cases in our ridings. And yes, immigration...
Est-ce qu'on peut vérifier le bruit dans...
Yes, can we just check what's happening out there? It's really very loud. More and more loud. Okay, the Honourable Member for Shefford. Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. In his speech, he talked about the complexity of cases that we face in our riding offices. For example, in Granby, where we welcome a lot of immigrants, my staff is very hardworking. It comes up a lot. But I really think that we need to reform the Immigration Act because currently it's archaic. Archaic and inhumane, too. So my question, in the amendments we proposed, the idea was to also ensure that Parliament would have accountability every year, so we'd have the statistics, how many people are affected, the costs, because we just don't have the numbers right now, so we need annual accountability to Parliament.
For Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Merci, Madame le Président. Je me remercie.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. The Liberals are continuing to show a lack of respect towards this Parliament. That's very clear. They rejected all of the committee recommendations. They do not respect the democratic process. And I agree with my colleague's question. Thank you.
And comments, the Honourable Member for Waterloo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I appreciated the comments that were shared by the member, and this is definitely legislation that within the riding of Waterloo has garnered some fruitful conversation. And there are examples that constituents have shared with me where they are hardworking, tax-paying Canadians, often speaking both official languages. In one case that is with my office, the parents worked for an international company abroad. They were born abroad, but have been in Canada for decades. She then went to a conference abroad and was not able to travel because she was pregnant, and at risk of causing harm to the unborn child, she ended up having to deliver that baby abroad. prior to returning to Canada, and that child does not have Canadian citizenship. So I would just like to hear the members' comments on that. And the second thing I would just ask is, we do know that we're trying to grow an economy, more international companies, hopefully more global citizens. And so is this something that we might need to consider as Canadians might be working and contribute to Canada, while perhaps possibly having to be abroad to contribute in meaningful ways as well? Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill, 20 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the member opposite for the question. I don't know if the member opposite has had an opportunity to read the amendments, but clearly this issue was addressed at committee. We put forth some very meaningful amendments that would address the case that she mentioned of her constituent in her riding. Unfortunately, she and the rest of her colleagues in the Liberal Party voted those amendments down, Madam Speaker.